After taking a lot of heat for the Baltimore Ravens loss to the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 13, Lamar Jackson has clapped back at the haters. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Really appreciate everybody for being here, whether you're an everyday or a first-time listener, or if you're somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much for all of your support. We're 5 days a week plus more here of daily Ravens coverage. We're here on a bonus episode on Saturday. Again, the Ravens ruined Thanksgiving, which was not a fun time. So hopefully you had a happy Thanksgiving before the Ravens game with food and friends and family and football. But of course, for the Ravens, wasn't great football that we watched on Thursday night. So in this show, we have a jam-packed show. We're going to talk about Lamar Jackson. He's clapped back at the haters, took to social media, and sent a couple messages. So we'll talk about that, and we'll dive into Lamar's performance a little bit more as well. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Ronnie Stanley giving an honest answer on the Ravens offense. And finally, we'll get into the Ravens and Bengals game and then a little bit more detail here. So thank you again for tuning in. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right. Well, for this Baltimore Ravens team, it was on the offense, it felt like, for the majority of this game. And the defense kind of let it go in the second half, but they held on for dear life in that first half, holding the Bengals to field goal after field goal for the majority of that contest. But the Ravens offense couldn't get anything going. Obviously, it starts with the quarterback and Lamar Jackson, and for many different circumstances, whether it be injuries, offensive line, or just flat out poor play, which Lamar did not play great on Thursday night. We can all acknowledge and admit that, while still, believing that Lamar is an all-time talent. Well, there were certainly quite a bit of takes that came out about Lamar after that game over the past, 24 hours. And, there were a lot of, trade him, overrated, not a good quarterback, you're never going to win, this, that, and the other. And, it seems like every quarterback but Lamar is allowed to have a bad game. And look, Lamar hasn't played great for 3 straight weeks. So it's a bad stretch of games. Even Kyle Hamilton said, even LeBron has an off night, I guess for Lamar, it's been an off month. But even still, there's a lot of talk that's just kind of crazy, and people kind of want to come out of the woodwork to bash on Lamar Jackson for things other than his performance in this game in particular, or just the last 3 weeks, where we can all acknowledge Lamar hasn't been great over the last 3 weeks of football. But he did take to social media and clap back at the haters a little bit on Friday night. So on social media, he was looking, I guess he found a tweet from Andrew Filipponi, who is a Steelers. He apparently is on 937 The Fan, Pittsburgh guy. That's his Pittsburgh radio station, apparently. And there was a tweet from him, and Filipponi has had a lot of tweets about Lamar. He's talking about Kenny Pickett and Lamar, and he thinks that Kenny Pickett, that Mason Rudolph and Lamar comparisons, saying this guy's going to be better, that guy's going to be better. And so there have been some tweets of his about Lamar that are very cold takes that have been, they've gone viral multiple different times. So after the game, Lamar was, I guess, looking on social media and found this from this was actually tweeted out during the game. And it was, can we all agree that Lamar Jackson is at the very least a little overrated? It's a picture of him from the AFC Championship game and, his hands on his head and whatnot. So Lamar Jackson responded to that and said, say less. And then there was a comment under that tweet from a Ravens fan that was talking about before the injuries, first 4 weeks of the season, where he ranked first in the NFL with 10 touchdown passes, 130.5 passer rating, first in the league, 32.8 points per game. That's third in the league from a team perspective. And Lamar responded to that and said, well, it's kind of like a shush emoji, and said, this what haters wait for. So, Lamar certainly feels the type way. And obviously, like, he understands that, he hasn't played well. He took accountability and acknowledged that and, said he has to be better and the team has to be better and whatnot. But, hopefully this serves as motivation for Lamar. I mean, I think Lamar's plenty motivated on his own, but, sometimes bulletin board material does work. And this could be something here where, this is it's a little clap back from Lamar Jackson. It's nothing super serious or anything. He's not, because sometimes Lamar gets on social media, and honestly, it's kind of funny when he does, because he doesn't really touch it for a little bit. Then he'll get on and he'll just go like boom, 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 like all these tweets that come out or posts or whatnot. And it's like funny things too most of the time. Like he'll post funny pictures of like edits of himself on like old pictures or whatnot, or he'll say. But sometimes he does come out of the woodwork to say stuff like this and respond to some of this stuff. And I don't have a problem with him doing that. I know some people responded to this and said, why don't you, show us on the field instead of on social media? I mean, can you do both? I mean, can he do both here? But he's acknowledging something that I think we all know, right? People just wait and lurk to have moments where they can attack Lamar Jackson. And again, like we did it all last night and all yesterday and all the day before during game day, right? Like we talked about it and how poor Lamar Jackson was. He did miss throws. He didn't look right. There were turnovers. Like, yes, it's okay to acknowledge that because Lamar didn't play well. And again, there are a bunch of different factors to that, which we've gone over, but it's okay to say like, yeah, Lamar wasn't up to standard and that's not okay. But you can't, and Shannon Sharp, I thought, put it perfectly, which is why we talked about it yesterday on our Friday episode. And I said, look, what Shannon essentially said on Nightcap about Lamar was Lamar didn't play well. It's okay to admit Lamar did not play well. He's a two-time MVP. No matter how bad he played tonight or in the future, you can't undo that. All those Pro Bowls and all those perfect ratings, you can't undo that. But talking about what we saw tonight, it's not good enough in order for the Ravens to go very far or even make the playoffs. If Lamar plays like this, they're winning games, but Lamar's not been accurate. So again, like it's 100% true. Like it's okay to acknowledge that Lamar wasn't good enough. And it's also okay to say, hey, this guy's still absolutely incredible, and not kind of wait for every moment to come out and say, okay, boom, Lamar. It's almost like, okay, write that down. Okay, note this, note that. And then when everybody's starting to pile on, it feels like everybody feels like they can come out of the woodwork again and say, oh, I told you so. Oh, Lamar's not really that good. And that's just a ridiculous thing to say. So again, you need to, I think, contextualize everything with every player. It's not just Lamar Jackson thing where we can contextualize a lot about a lot of different players, but Lamar doing what he did in this game. And again, just the stat line to put it out there. He went 17 of 32, 246, no touchdowns, one interception. He hasn't had a touchdown in 3 straight games, which is tough, but I don't know why people like to, really only focus on the negative for Lamar when there is so much more positive about him, both on and off the field, for being honest. That's a whole different conversation and tangent. But, there are so many games you can just look at from Lamar and say, wow, that's so awesome. That's so amazing. But it's just like, a negative thing happens or a game happens. And again, it just feels like Lamar is the only quarterback, or at least one of the only quarterbacks that's not allowed to have a bad game. And he's had a bad stretch, but at the same time, every quarterback has bad stretches. It's just coming at a very unfortunate time here. At least this past game, they've won their last 2, but whether it be the injuries or the offensive line, or, he doesn't think it's a mechanical thing with his accuracy. So he does need to be better. And again, hopefully what he saw on social media will be a form of motivation, but I do believe he and the team is plenty motivated without that stuff. And they understand what's at stake here. They have an opportunity next week against the Steelers to get back on track. Honestly, that game is more important than the Bengals game anyway, but the Bengals game, I'm not downplaying. It was mighty important, and it's one that, you have to learn a lot of lessons from. And we'll get into that because, a lot of times it's like you want to know every week if you go 0-1, all right, that's what it is. But there are a lot of other concern points in this game where it's just like you really have to take a hard look at this thing. And like you have to move on because like it is a week-to-week league. But, there are some concern points. And the number one concern for me is because this team goes as Lamar Jackson goes. So the number one concern point for me is Lamar Jackson and how he'll be able to, with the health thing. And again, I see a lot of comments from people like, oh, he's healthy. He's not his health. I personally disagree. And if you don't agree that he is not healthy and you think he is, I respect that opinion. But, we've also heard Lamar Jackson openly say that, like, okay, his toe got stepped on and, just doesn't look like the same player right now. So I think he's definitely banged up personally. And you need to get him as healthy as possible. Hopefully, this mini bye will do that. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about what Ronnie Stanley had to say about this offense, because I think you raised some points. He got honest about the offense, and I want to talk about what we saw on Thursday night from that group in a little more detail. So stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And in the NBA, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. And right now, over on FanDuel, the Nuggets currently have the second best NBA championship odds on FanDuel at plus 700. The only team that has better odds than them is the Thunder. They're at plus 140. They're the defending champs, so I get that. But I think Denver's had a good start to the season. I mean, tough loss on Friday night to the Spurs, but regardless, I like what they're building. When they get some of their pieces back from injury, I think it'll be really, really good for them. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving along here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this bonus episode on Saturday. Thanks for spending some time on your weekend here with me on Locked On Ravens. And, hopefully your weekend's off to a better start than the end of the week went for the Ravens, obviously with Baltimore ruining Thanksgiving and all. But again, thanks so much for spending some time with me. We're a 5-day week plus more daily Ravens show. So we have Ravens content and coverage. Regular show is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time, but we also have bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines. And during the season, there are a lot of headlines. So that means a lot of bonus episodes. We also have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during games where we instantly react to every single play. We also have instant reaction shows after games as well as after pieces of Ravens big news. And then, of course, we have the Locked On Ravens squad show, myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. So win, lose, or tie, although we don't like ties here on Locked On Ravens, we have that Daily Ravens coverage for you. The offense was, again, that's the big storyline coming out of this game for the Ravens. And Ronnie Stanley, after the game, I thought he gave a very interesting assessment on how he felt like the offense performed. So, he talked about the offense and after the first drive, because the first drive was great. The first drive was awesome. But then he said, quote, there was not enough production. We weren't finishing the drives. There were too many mistakes. It was a lot of things that we've been battling. Then he was asked about the run game. And he said, quote, I felt the run game, especially early on, got going. We got Derrick Henry going, and he rushed for a touchdown early on. I think we just have to keep it going and keep the momentum going, and we make sure that's our identity, and we have to make it work. And there was a lot of conversation points about, the Ravens essentially abandoning their run game again, which we're going to get to in a minute here, but I want to continue with Stanley here, because he was asked then about if there are any instances where players can suggest ideas for offensive plays. And so Stanley said, yes, that's definitely part of it, is the collaboration part, wanting to get back to the run. That's something that we encourage the coaches to do when we come back to the sideline. We're still going to go out there and run whatever play is called. That's a very interesting comment, in my opinion, from Ronnie Stanley. I think the offense, with what we saw on the ground on Thursday night, again, their stats is the Ravens averaged 5.6 yards per carry. Derrick Henry averaged 6 yards a carry. Keaton Mitchell averaged 9.5 on 2 carries. So smaller sample size there, but still the production was there. I know it was an 18-yard run for the touchdown, but even still, he had that big play. But the Ravens just felt like they completely abandoned the run game again in this game. I mean, Derrick Henry balls out early in that game with the early touchdown run. The Ravens' 2 touchdowns were on the ground. And then Derrick Henry has a great stretch, and then we don't see him for 3 drives. Keaton Mitchell has a touchdown, and then, all right, well, where's Keaton? I haven't seen him in 10 million years. That's the kind of stuff. And this goes back to the AFC Championship game. It goes back to the 2019 Titans game. This is not just the Todd Monken thing. Greg Roman did it, but the denominator there is John Harbaugh. And so we talked about how yesterday John Harbaugh finally took accountability, but he did it for the wrong thing. It's whoa, Harbaugh taking accountability, but he did it for the turnovers. And not for the game plan. The game plan I thought was not there for them, especially because I thought that they didn't do a good job of keeping their running backs involved. And there's no world where Rasheen Ali could have more carries than Keaton Mitchell. And I know those Ali carries came, most of, I think, 3 in garbage time, but even still, that should not be something. But the even more glaring thing was the snap counts where Rasheen Ali outsnapped Derrick Henry in this game, 29-24. And then Keaton Mitchell only had 8 snaps. There's no world where that should be what's going on here. I know Rasheen Ali was taking over for Justice Hill, pass protection role, this, that, and the other. You have to use your stars. You have to do it. And this has been like, I don't honestly know if the Ravens know how to utilize Derrick Henry, or maybe they just don't want a bell cow running back. Like, I don't know the situation. I get game flow and game script, and the Ravens are playing from behind. You know what helps? Especially when the game is not like completely out of reach. I mean, the Ravens are down, 12 points for a lot of the game, got back to within like 5 or something. I mean, that's not, oh, wow, we have to abandon the run game. I mean, again, like, did they get scared? Like, I don't understand. I mean, I think that once the defense started to give up those plays, did Todd Monken and John Harbaugh say, okay, man, we really need to like get this thing going, try to pick up some chunks. And, we saw potential from this offensive group. Like, again, the likely play would have been a touchdown if it didn't fumble, but again, like, it happened. So that's what the play was. You don't get brownie points for, a long catch and run if the play ends in a fumble. The Zay Flowers OPI was a really soft call. That should have been a touchdown as well. So like, we saw those flashes, but you have to respond. And Cincinnati's defense played very inspired in this game, but it's still not an excuse. Like, the Ravens, to let a defense do that to them is just flat out embarrassing, let alone one of the worst defenses of all time by multiple different metrics. And all across the board, that Bengals defense is last or second to last in nearly every single major defensive category. And one of the things that you do is, like, if you just start passing on every play, I mean, what is that? It takes away a whole part of your offense, which is what the opposing defense is trying to do anyway. You're essentially helping out the opposing defense by doing that. So, I thought it was very interesting where, Stanley saying wanting to get back to the run. That's something we encourage the coaches to do when we come back to the sideline. And then he said, but we're still going to go out there and run whatever play is called. I think that Stanley, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so don't like quote me on it, but that sounds to me like Stanley's like, yeah, we probably should run the ball more. And whether that is what he meant or not, I mean, I don't know, but that's just what it sounds like to me. So maybe Stanley will get asked to clarify it, and maybe we'll get an answer on that. But very interesting answer there from Stanley. He also said it was very frustrating, obviously, not to execute the offensive success level that they want, and he said being around football for a little bit, playing for a while, and, he understands that they have the personnel to do it. And he said, quote, that's just not our standard, especially speaking for the offense. He said, I thought the defense did a great job, but offensively, that is not our standard. And he said that there is a snowball effect of frustration when the offensive drive comes up short. And, he said that the best teams weather those types of storms and still push through at the end. But as I said on the show, like the Instant Reaction show, and even the show yesterday, I said, look, this team overcame their losses early in the season. It was impressive. 5-game win streak, getting out of that rut. Like, you got to tip your cap to them. But they still don't look like contenders at this point. And, we can also acknowledge that the opponents that they beat over that stretch. And obviously, look, the Bears are playing great football right now. They did that without Lamar. That win is extremely impressive, even though Chicago didn't have like starting secondary. But, they did that thing and they won it. And that was really impressive. But, then you have teams like the Jets and the Vikings and the Browns and, like, hey, well, like, you did what you were supposed to do. But these other games are going to start to come up, right? These other games are going to start to creep up on your schedule with a Pittsburgh and, et cetera, et cetera. And again, the Miami game obviously was another one of those games, but Patriots, Packers, another Bengals game. You're going to have to grow up and figure this thing out here if you're Baltimore, because there's not a lot of time left here. 6-6, you're still in a fine spot, especially in this AFC. In no way, shape, or form am I declaring this season over. I'm not doing it. But, you need to figure it out on the offensive side of the ball, because at the end of the day, if the offense keeps looking like this, they're not going to make the playoffs because there are plenty of other teams here that, and they don't have tiebreakers in the AFC either, by the way. Chiefs, nope. Bills, nope. Texans, nope. Bengals right now, nope. Like, you don't have those tiebreakers. So, got to win this division. You took a tough loss to a division rival. You have to. I mean, I think this Pittsburgh game is an absolute must win, like 1,000% must win game for the Ravens in this one. So obviously that'll be a big lead up over the course of the next week here. But kind of in the final part of the show, continue talking more about the Ravens and Bengals game, talk about what we saw and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, rounding out this bonus edition of the show. Again, appreciate everybody being here. If you have a friend or a family member who likes daily Ravens coverage or likes the Ravens and wants daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them our way over here on Locked On Ravens. And also, you can follow me on social media at Oestreicher34 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. All right, let's do a little bit more of a dive into this Bengals-Ravens game. You know, we talked about it a little bit yesterday and, you know, obviously during the game on Thursday as well after the game. But just the run game stuff, we've already dove into that. Lamar, we've already dove into that. So receiving-wise, likely had 5 for 95. But, again, it was all overshadowed by the fumble. And, you know, we actually talked about this on the Locked On Ravens squad show, and I'll actually pull back up the tight end contracts for the league right now. But I think Isaiah Likely, because there have been a lot of Ravens players that I think have increased their money this offseason that they're going to get, like Jordan Stout, Travis Jones. I think Linderbaum's kind of stayed even despite the O-line's woes. He's had moments of great and moments of not so great. You know, Chidobe Awuzie's looked great. Charlie Kohler, I think. Like, there are a lot of guys that I think are going to get paid as much, if not more, than what I thought they were going to before the season started. Likely, unfortunately, that's not the case for me here, obviously. And it's been a weird year for him with the foot injury. That was obviously a setback. He comes back and then he's playing with Cooper Rush and Tyler Huntley, and this hasn't been able to really get back on his feet. And so with the tight end money that's being handed out across the league right now in terms of average annual value, which I think is interesting, you know, right now Evan Ingram's making $11.5 million a year. Juwan Johnson, 10.25. Dallas Goedert, 10. Taysom Hill, 10. Like, all of those things are, you know, you got to factor all that in if you're the Ravens. Freiermuth is making 12. Jake Ferguson, 12.5. Cole Kmet, 12.5. I mean, I don't know what I'd pay Likely right now, if I'm being honest. I mean, they're not going to make that decision right now. Likely is definitely not. He's going to hope that he can bounce back and get his value back up. The Ravens, I'm sure, are trying to sign him to an extension right now if they want him on the team. But, you know, now I've seen more Ravens fans come out and say, whoa, what about Mark? You know, what Mark over So I don't know what's going to happen with this tight end position. Again, I still think it's the smarter play to sign Likely over Andrews, but Andrews has had the much more productive season for them in terms of stats. I mean, he has 5 touchdowns on the season, and in an offense where the targets are very much going to Zay Flowers, Andrews is second on the team with 52 targets and obviously second in receptions with 37 there as well. He actually leads the team in touchdowns by a wide margin with 5. So again, I don't know what they're going to do there, but it's also not great when your receivers, your top 2 guys, Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman, 2 for 6 on the day. 2 catches for 6 yards for those guys combined, and they were both courtesy of Zay Flowers. And on that second one, he had the fumble, the 5th turnover for the Ravens. We talked about that. Those guys just, they weren't good enough. And again, like Zay had the touchdown called back. I get that, but you know, that's what happened. And it's unfortunate. It's the wrong call, in my opinion, but you know, it is what it is. For Bateman, you know, he had a throw that he was open on that Lamar sailed over his head. But, you know, these guys just aren't getting open enough consistently, and it needs to be less of a tight end-centric offense here, in my opinion. Again, defensively, I thought that they played admirably until, you know, they didn't at the end there. But Chidobe Awuzie playing great, and, you know, Marlon coming off the edge and having a sack. Although Marlon had some tough moments against Jamar Chase in this one. Nate Wiggins, he left the game early, and John Harbaugh said he could miss some time, but it's not a serious thing. 1 for 6 in the red zone for Cincinnati, so the defense did their job there. 1 for 2 for Baltimore. They weren't really getting opportunities in there nonetheless. But again, the time possession battle, like this defense, as I talked about yesterday, was just, they were tired out. They were absolutely tired out. in this game, 8 of 19. The fact that I don't think I've seen a team have 19 third down opportunities also, and they converted on it. I think they were 8 of 16 at one point, and then I think faltered towards the end of the game, if I'm not mistaken. I might be remembering that wrong. And the Ravens 3 of 10, though. So Cincinnati runs 23 more plays than Baltimore does. All things that need to be improved upon, because it's crazy. The Ravens, they outpassed the Bengals and they outran the Bengals in terms of yards per attempt, but that wasn't good enough because of the untimely turnovers and the defense holding the Bengals to field goals when it was like, oh, the Bengals get the ball back at the Ravens 2-yard line, at the Ravens 5-yard line, 10, whatever it was, like inside the red zone. Holding the field goals on those plays and on those possessions kept the Ravens offense attached, but they couldn't quite pull themselves back in over the course of the game, which was really disheartening because I thought that the Ravens weren't really out of this game until it was too late. Probably like that third quarter was probably once it was 3 possessions, and it didn't get to 3 possessions for a while, where again, like since he was driving and then Travis Jones forces that turnover. So like they were always still there, but by that point the game was, they were running, the Ravens had like one timeout. Like it was dire at that point, but they were in this game longer than I think, at least I thought that they were in the game longer than some people might, some people might think. I think people might disagree with me on that, but they were at least attached. So, tough all the way around. Hopefully they can bounce back next week against the Steelers. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage coming up. Maybe another bonus episode tomorrow, maybe not, but if not, we're going to be back here on Monday with our regularly scheduled programming. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.